Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us today and welcome to today's Tracker Intelligence webinar, Public Sector Construction Investment and Where the Money is Moving in 2026 to 27. My name is Christian Doak from the Public Policy team at BIP Solutions, the company behind Tracker Intelligence, and we're delighted to have you with us for what promises to be a genuinely data-rich and commercially useful session. And to find out more about Tracker Intelligence and get a personalized consultation to uncover opportunities for your business, please type Tracker into the chat box or visit www.trackerintelligence.com. Now, 1 year into the Procurement Act and £67 billion of public sector construction pipeline is re-entering procurement in the next 6 months alone. So the question we're here to answer today is simple. Can your business see it? This webinar draws on analysis of roughly 10,000 of public sector construction procurement records captured between August 2025 and January 2026, and it's designed to give you a clear, actionable picture of exactly where public money is moving and what you need to do now to be in the right place when it lands. Whether you're a national contractor managing a complex framework portfolio or an SME looking to grow your public sector footprint, today's session will give you the intelligence you need to focus your bid resource where it matters most in the 2026-27 financial year. And by the time we're done today, you'll leave with a clear picture of where public money is moving in the next year, an understanding of the structural risks and opportunities in the market right now, and 3 practical actions that you can implement this week. And to help us work through all of that, I'm delighted to be joined by Dawn McTaggart, who is a specialist in public sector market intelligence at BIP Solutions and has been central to the analysis underpinning today's session. Dawn has spent years working at the intersection of procurement data and commercial strategy, helping suppliers and public sector buyers understand the market trends that really matter. She's been through this most recent public sector construction procurement intelligence with a fine-tooth comb, and there's nobody better placed to help us make sense of the data we'll be covering today. So Dawn, thank you very much for joining us and welcome to today's webinar.
Thank you so much, Christian. It's great to be part of today's webinar. And yes, certainly the construction sector is a huge part of public sector in the UK and indeed across the globe. So looking forward to the insight that we can share with you today.
Absolutely. And thank you once again for joining us. So Dawn, let's set the scene first. The data underpinning today's session that we're talking about covers more than 9,400 public sector construction procurement records across a 6-month period. And the headline numbers really are striking. So £67 billion of construction pipeline entering re-procurement in the next 6 months. 2,902 contracts and frameworks are expiring before August of 2026 as well. So what should construction suppliers take from these figures? And what do they tell us about the urgency of having forward pipeline intelligence right now?
Well, I think the first thing that needs to be taken from the figures is just the sheer volume of money that is being spent. I mean, construction has always been one of the big players in public sector revenue, and that's something that is continuing and indeed increasing. The reason that we're highlighting the pipeline work is because having worked in this space for as long as we have at BIP, over 40 years working with both buyers and suppliers, we completely recognise how important it is to engage as early as possible. When a tender comes out, it's very limited the dialogue you can have with buying authorities. So planning in advance is absolutely critical. It's so important to get involved at the very earliest stages because it's at that point that you can really influence contract, get your name known. It's a very, very competitive market. So if you can do anything that sets you ahead of your competitors and give you that first mover advantage, that is critical. So the reason that we really look at the pipeline notices is because waiting for a tender to come out, invariably a lot of the companies that I work with say if we don't know about it before it comes out, we're too late. So we need to be analysing the data, we need to be looking at what's coming up for renewal. Frameworks are increasing all the time, and I know we'll spend a bit of time on today's session doing that, a bit more of a deep dive on frameworks. But yes, it's an incredibly lucrative market, it's an incredibly busy time, and it's so important to be prepared.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, yes, for that overview there. And looking at procurement activity across the 6-month period, October 2025 was one that really stood out in the data. So I wonder if you can walk us through what drove that particular spike. We saw 106 prior information notices, 745 contract notices, and 947 awards in that single month. And as well as that, what the dip in that we also saw in January 2026 perhaps also tells us about what's likely to come next as we move through Q1.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the figures are changing constantly because of the sheer volume that we're looking at. And it also depends. I mean, construction is such a wide topic. It's such a huge industry. And there'll be a lot of people on today's call that will only be one part of that construction. So I'll try and illustrate over the next sort of 30, 40 minutes how we can sort of identify, rather than looking at construction as a total industry, looking at specifics that maybe relate more to some of the companies that we've got on board today. But I think it's important to know the pre-information notices are critical because that gives you the prior warning. If you're going to have that spike in October, that means that you're getting identifying contracts in advance. There are a lot of trends. There are a lot of seasonal trends, and a lot of time that can be very based on the financial year, when authorities want to allocate their budgets, when they want to award contracts to ensure that that they're spending their budget before the new financial year begins. So really, if I just can actually just take you on for a moment and share my screen with you and share some of the intel that we can provide. I've done a very generic search on construction sector because it is so moving and it's such a huge sector. But this shows you some of the contracts that have been published just over the last 12 months. So it can give you an idea as to the volume. 13,599 results. The results change depending on the searchings that we're looking at. The awarded contracts is where it's critical, and this shows that spike that you were referring to there. That gives you visibility of the seasonality. But what it also shows you is when contracts are coming up for renewal, so you can really plan in advance. And that's something that we're really focusing on, is looking at when these contracts are coming up for renewal. So you can even filter this by end date so that you can see exactly when all these contracts, some of them very, very long term, so you can plan years in advance what you want to be doing, but knowing the amount of money that's being spent, looking at this average monthly values, it's eye-watering numbers, but it's all about preparation and knowing about things in advance.
Absolutely. And that's a really useful illustration you raised there. So thank you. And one of the really interesting findings, I think, in the data concerns who is actually buying and how the picture changes depending on whether you're measuring by volume or value. So local government leads on award value, or volume rather, 2,459 awards. But central government has led on value with nearly £175 billion recorded. And then there's education, which is only about sixth by award count, but second by total value at over £114 billion. What should suppliers make of that particular picture, and how does it change how they think about which buyers to be targeting?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, many sectors, construction sector being no different, it is across all marketplaces. And certainly a lot of the suppliers that I speak to, they say if they've had some success within a particular sector, they really want to replicate that, using that as part of their case studies. But identifying where the money is being spent helps them identify where they want to be targeting. I'm constantly speaking to companies who are saying, well, it's such a huge landscape, we need to be a bit more focused on where we don't want the scattergun approach. We want to be knowing exactly which authorities we want to be targeting and also which sectors we want to be looking at. So again, let me just share my screen with you again quickly, and I'll illustrate how that can be shared through the tracker solution as well, because obviously we are dealing with a huge industry. So we've added a number of different filters to help really navigate your way around the sector. And one of these is the industry sector. So what you can do with this is you can actually, as you've mentioned, defence, energy, education, health, all huge. So what we're looking at the moment is the total industry. If you have success in a particular sector, you can filter it by those sectors. You can also filter it by region. We're looking at the UK. If you want to look at the full UK, you can filter it that way. So if you're a more regional company and you want to focus on healthcare in the Northwest, very simple to do that. But more than anything, it allows us to identify, right, if we are wanting to look at healthcare, how big is that market? So again, keeping this very generic construction in general, just focusing on the healthcare market, click of a button stuff, you've got that visibility. So it allows business development teams, marketing teams, and strategists within organizations to start identifying, right, who do we want to be targeting? What do we want to be looking at? We do take that one step further, though, because it's important to know where the money is actually being spent. And sometimes the values attached to contracts are a forecast by the authorities. They can be sometimes quite accurate, other times they can be very much an idea of what they anticipate the spend will be. So at BIP and at Tracker, we take that one step further and we actually identify where spend is actually taking place. So this will give you an industry snapshot. What we've got is a spend analysis tool. Public authorities in the UK now have got to publish who they're working with and how much they're spending. I'm just going to choose one of the key players within the construction sector, Waits Construction. And this can give you really strong information on how active a particular company is. So legislation indicates they have to publish who they're working with and how much they're spending. This data is available in the public domain, but like most public sector data, it's available across hundreds, if not thousands of sites. So we take all of that data, aggregate it and amalgamate it into the Tracker solution. But we don't just give you the raw data, we analyse that. So here as one quick example, because I'm conscious of time, Waits Construction have invoiced over £318 million just in the last 12 months. Rather than just giving you that high level overview though, what we're looking at is we marry that up with the contract awards. So very quickly you can see which contracts that spend relates to and even down to how long they're left outstanding. So if you're a competitor of Waits, or indeed if you're a company that want to partner or subcontract, you know exactly where that spend is coming from. You can see they're working with 34 buyers, Department of Education being the main one. This is a bit, again, about seasonality and an average over a 5-year period, so you can see how the trends look. But most importantly, what we've identified is where should your target list be? So if you're a company that wants to compete with the large players within this construction sector, you can see who they're working with, how much they're invoicing, the total volume of transactions. We've even implemented a business relationship scoring, which is an algorithm our data science team have implemented, which helps companies identify the strength of that relationship. This is based on a combination of the longevity, so obviously the longer they've been working together, the stronger that relationship will be, and the volume and value of transactions. So this can show you, even although Department for Education is the highest spend, they've actually got a much stronger relationship with House of Commons. So if you were wanting to disrupt those relationships, it allows you to do that with much more data-driven decisions. You can also look at a buying authority as well. So there's a huge amount of analysis, which I'd be happy to share with anyone individually that wants to see more on this after today's webinar.
Of course, thank you. And it is a huge repository of information that we have available. So thank you for, giving a snapshot of that. If we could talk a little bit for now on frameworks, because this is also one of the most structurally significant findings in the report. So the data shows that 78% of awards are non-framework, but the 22% that are framework-based carry disproportionately high value. And I think this is something we have seen for a little while now. There are 425 frameworks worth £61 billion, just over, expiring in the next 6 months. So again, what are the implications for suppliers, be that the incumbents who are at risk and the challengers who might see this as an entry window? How should they be viewing this?
Well, I think frameworks is absolutely critical because the value of revenue that's through the frameworks, I mean, there's £400 billion spent each year in the UK, and as you rightly say, a big percentage of that is procured through frameworks. Frameworks are excellent to get on because it ensures that you're not having to go through a tender exercise every time. You're basically part of a preferred suppliers list. What we need to understand though, and a lot of companies that I speak to that are maybe quite new to public sector don't recognise, is that being on a framework doesn't guarantee you work. You need to know what's happening on that framework. And there are so many frameworks that are out there. You need to also identify which frameworks do we want to be targeting, who's procuring through these frameworks. So historically, for many years, through Tracker, we've been giving visibility to our customer base on frameworks, when they start, when they end, but very much based on customer feedback. Our customers were saying to us, we need to know all the bits in between. We need to know who's procuring, which suppliers are winning the most, because we want to be targeting the right frameworks. Depending on the size of the organisation, depending on your own capacity, you want to make sure that you're spending your time and resource making sure you're on the frameworks that are going to be the most fruitful for you. So with that in mind, we've actually implemented a new feature within the Tracker solution, which is based purely around frameworks. And our data science team have manually mapped over 14,000 frameworks from over 6,000 buyers. The beauty of this is you can be really, really specific as to what frameworks you want to be looking at. You can filter that by keywords. You can even filter it by an authority if you want to work with a specific company authority. If you've got a competitor that you want to look at all the frameworks, you can filter it that way. You can even take it as far as looking at a particular framework. So I'm just going to choose one of the larger professionals. And again, this is just really to provide you with a very high-level overview of what this particular feature provides you with, and happy to share more content on a case-by-case basis. But if we look at construction professional services, rather than just giving you the details of the contract, now that's important. What we've done with this is we've provided you with the information. We've also added a lot of AI and machine learning. Now, AI is taking over the world. We're embracing it. What this does is it gives you a framework description. So very quickly, as part of your bid evaluation, you can see a bit more information on the description of the framework, on the scope of the work, the key features involved. It cuts down a huge amount of bid evaluation time, ensuring that you're spending time and resource in the right place. What we've also done is added a personal insight. So this is not based on the industry. Again, I've used the same example of Waits Construction to keep it universal. But what this is showing you is we're identifying, does this strongly align with your capabilities? Is this a framework that you should be targeting? And again, that's based on a lot of AI and a lot of work, intuitive work in the background by our data science team. So if you were utilising this platform, this would be based on your business, not on generic keywords or generic terminology. The assessment, the strengths and the risks, even competitor insights, and identifying next steps. But what it also shows you is you've got a list of all of the notices, a list of all of the awards, but most critically, and certainly the companies that I'm working with utilising this part more than anything, this framework is a large DPS. Multiple authorities are utilising this framework, but you need to know who they are. So this information provides you with all the buyers who are actually procuring through this framework. So if you were one of the incumbents and you identify that Ministry of Defence are coming up for renewal on a contract, there's nothing to stop you contacting MOD, identifying we are on this framework, you are utilising this framework, we could work together through a direct award. So it cuts down the time you're taking to put together a tender response, and it also ensures that the authorities are being more efficient, because efficiency is obviously a huge thing. So knowing exactly all the different authorities that are procuring through this framework is hugely valuable. What we've also done, though, is added the suppliers list. So as I've said at the outset, being on a framework does not guarantee you work. What you can see from this is these are all the companies, and here's a list of all the direct awards, all the call-offs that they're actually winning through this framework. So through data-driven decisions, again, it gives you that opportunity to ensure that you're targeting the right frameworks. If you're identifying that the big players in the market are being awarded the lion's share of the work, this might not be the right framework for you. Or conversely, if you know that you can be really competitive against these players, then maybe this is the framework to be targeting. All the analysis is done for you. Hours and hours of spreadsheets and PDFs are no longer required. We can provide you with all of that content. So hugely valuable, and something we're continuing to update continuously through the platform as our roadmap of development.
Of course, and thank you very much for running us through that, Dawn. Now let's move on to what is arguably the most time-critical element of today's session, which is the forward pipeline and what's about to happen in the sort of coming period. So there are 1,371 contracts and frameworks expiring in March alone, 1,159 contract awards, and 212 frameworks. So what is driving that concentration? And for a supplier who hasn't yet mapped their exposure to that spike, what does acting now versus waiting look like in practice?
Well, again, going back to the early engagement principle, I mean, there are busy times, there are not so busy times, not too many not so busy times in recent time, I has to say. But it is all about that forward planning. So knowing about contracts in advance, especially if you're wanting to get involved in frameworks, you need to know when they're coming up for renewal, and you need to be prepared. You need to be mapping out the the data needs to be exactly what kind of opportunities you're wanting to be targeting rather than just taking a scattergun approach. There are busy expiry months, which means that you need to plan in advance as well. So many companies I speak to say that we get 5 tenders landing on our desk in any given day. That's just not feasible for most businesses to be able to plan in advance. So knowing the trends, knowing when contracts are coming up for renewal allows you to be really strategic as about the work to go for. Depending on your own capacity, how many bids you go for. We don't necessarily want you to be bidding more. We want you to be ensuring that when you do go through the time and resource of putting tenders together, you're doing so with the best chance of winning. So it's pre-planning again, which is the underlying message that we send to most suppliers in so many different aspects of public procurement.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And on expiring frameworks specifically, the data is pointing to local government as the dominant source, so 256 of the 425 expiring frameworks relate to them. But health frameworks are also flagged as carrying the highest individual values. So under the Procurement Act 2023, open framework provisions now allow suppliers to join at designated intervals. So how does that change the strategic calculus for suppliers tracking those expiries? And where do you see the most sort of overlooked opportunities in the framework pipeline against that backdrop?
Yes, it's been an absolutely huge and, in my opinion, hugely positive change in the frameworks. Traditionally, frameworks had a start date and had an end date. And if you were unfortunate to miss that, you're locked out of working with those authorities for the duration, which invariably was on average about 3 to 4 years. So a lot of companies just missed out, and it meant that had a huge implication on their future growth aspirations and potential. Now with the open frameworks, which are very much in line with the Procurement Act 2023, which we've obviously been analysing hugely and been involved in the consultation process with Cabinet Office over, so we're in a very strong position to help support our suppliers through the ever-changing landscape of public sector. But it's meaning that there are opportunities, there are intervals during the duration of the framework which allow you to get involved. So you're not going to be locked out for the same amount of time. So it does mean that, again, you want to be planning in advance. I'm not saying waiting for the framework to reopen. Start planning now. So if you know that you've missed a deadline, you've got a few months before the next one comes. So again, it just allows you to ensure that you're giving yourself your best chance.
Absolutely, thank you. And we've talked a lot today about the public sector pipeline, but construction businesses obviously don't just operate in a vacuum, and the private sector is a significant part of that picture too. Are you able to talk a little bit about sort of commercial projects and how they can help to sort of complement suppliers' public sector strategy?
Absolutely. I mean, private sector does take up a lot of the construction sector, and we completely recognise that. I mean, at BIP, our history and our footprint is very much public sector specific. However, because we recognise that most companies cross across both public and private, we track all of the commercially new build and refurbishments. We do that by tracking the 490 planning departments UK-wide, and we also track all refurbishment projects or new build on things like brownfield that don't require planning. So we are able to provide a comprehensive list of any new build, any refurbishment project from the very earliest planning stage right through to the supply chain. So even if it's not public sector, you can get that visibility through Tracker. But the public sector and the private sector do merge frequently. So with commercial projects, something that may start off as a public sector project can then, through supply chain, become privately funded work. And that's something that we will track. So from the very earliest stages, so if you want to get involved at that pre-planning stage, engage with clients directly, engage at architectural stage, engage at planning stage, we can provide you with all of the contact information as to who to be speaking to. Or if you're further down the supply chain and you want to engage with main contractors, you're not in a position to actually bid directly for this work, but you do want to be involved as a subcontractor. We can show you who's being awarded contracts, who the project lead are on those projects, and allow you to actually be involved further down supply chain. So public and private sector, it's not a black and white. There's a lot of grey areas and there's a lot of merging, but we can provide you with all the content you need for both.
Ideal. Yes, thank you very much. The report also looked at the supplier landscape, and there's some striking structural findings there. So the report identified 5 specific intelligence gaps that cost construction suppliers contracts. So these have been described as running blind on price, missing framework windows, reactive discovery, fragmented intelligence, and having no post-loss intelligence. So in your experience working with construction businesses across the market, which of those gaps tends to be the most costly really in practice? And what does closing it look like for a mid-sized contractor or an SME?
It's a very good question because it's hard to sort of identify which of those 5 key gaps are the most significant. But certainly, speaking purely in my experience, I've been with BIP nearly 15 years now, so I've spoken with a lot of companies from your startup small businesses to your multinational corporations. And I would say in my experience, reactive discovery is probably the most painful and the most impactful on businesses. And because people who are working reactively are missing so many opportunities. You might think that you're going into an open procedure where you've got as good a chance as anyone else of winning the work, but having that dialogue early enough is going to have such a huge impact because that gives you the opportunity to get your name known, to be more proactive, to be involved in that early consultation process. The authorities that we work with, because remember, we work with both sides of the fence here. We support suppliers, but we also publish directly for buyers. Companies, the authorities use that early consultation process as an education piece. They're looking at that to learn from suppliers as to what should we be putting in the tender specification. So working more proactively and not just working on a reactive basis allows you to influence contracts and significantly increase your chances of winning. But in saying that, I'm torn because I really do believe fragmented intelligence is a big, big challenge for most organisations as well. There are so many different places that authorities publish their work, intelligence on the public sector, market trends and spend data. So having raw data thrown at you from multiple different sides can be incredibly time consuming. It can be you can get lost in the noise. So having a system like Tracker that puts all of that together, that analyses it, that cleanses it, that gives it to you in bite-sized, tangible pieces, allowing you to make your own business decisions. It's your bid, no bid strategy. All we're trying to do here is help you with that. So all 5, I think, have their own challenges, but I would say long-winded answer to a shorter question, I would say I would highlight reactive discovery and fragmented intelligence. Put the intelligence in one place, have it analysed for you, and take on a more proactive approach.
Perfect. Thank you very much. We've mentioned pre-market engagement as a key lever, and the data suggests that by the time the tender is published, suppliers who haven't been active are already potentially as much as 8 to 12 weeks behind. So what does, in that context, effective pre-market engagement actually look like for a construction supplier in 2026? And how can tools like Tracker Intelligence help businesses get ahead of the tender rather than simply responding to it?
Well, I think it's a combination of a lot of things. I mean, early engagement is so important. Monitoring the awards and the spend data is absolutely critical. So again, I'll just take you back into the tracker system just to show you as a very high level overview all the different ways that we can manipulate the data to make sure that you're giving yourself your best chance of winning, because that is absolutely critical. So I've just shared my screen with you. And what I would stress now, I'm going to give you a very high whirlwind tour around the system to showcase all the different features and how they feed in together. But I've based this in construction sector, obviously, with the audience, but this system relates to any industry sector, and we support you fully throughout. So there's lots of ways you can customize this. There are so many different parts to the system. You can set reminders of contracts that are coming up for renewal, start building that pipeline of work, because that is so important. The contract search, we publish every contract. We source all contracts across the board. You can run a search on construction. You can run a search on anything at all. You can have multiple profiles. I've chosen prime contractors as an example to showcase to you. Very simple and straightforward. What we do here is build a profile based on keywords and phrases. We use CPV codes. In the background, the AI and machine learning starts analysing that, starts giving you the most relevant contracts. We don't just give you the most up-to-date will give you up to 5 years archives because of the cycle of contracts. They run in 3 and 4 year cycles. So running that search, the reactive part is you'll get an email every morning with all contracts that match your search. Remember, you can run different searches on industry sector. You can run different searches on regions. What we can also do here, and again, getting back to the early engagement, again, in line with the Procurement Act, what you can do is start tracking all the UK1 pipeline notices, which is the planned procurement for the new financial year. So very timely as we enter in the new financial year, and all your market engagement notifications. We're tracking and aggregating this. So this is preempting what's coming up in the future. So again, sales teams, marketing teams, senior executive level strategists can start planning in advance. These are the authorities we want to be working with. But we've been advocating the importance of early engagement for many, many years, and we do that primarily through the awarded contracts. So the awarded contracts allow you to track when contracts are up for renewal, who the incumbent is. You can even set reminders. So if you see a contract that's of interest, you want to get involved, but it's too far out, simply set a reminder. That will automatically populate a reminder onto your dashboard, and it integrates into your email. So this is based on prime contractors. Equally, if you're in facilities and estate managers, if you're mechanical and electrical, whatever it may be, we've got a profile. You build it, it's based on what you do. So this is the crux of everything that we do. You've got visibility across the board. We then add things like the frameworks module, which I've showcased briefly to you, the commercial projects, which is what's tracking the privately funded work. Your spend analysis tool, which again I touched upon, you can track any competitor, any authority. Your database of decision makers is another feature that we haven't touched on yet, but again, it's very much in line with working with public sector and who do you want to be targeting. If you want to work with an NHS trust, for example, you've got visibility of multiple points of contact. This has really helped to support early engagement because the named contacts that appear on tenders are invariably people sitting within procurement teams, or more and more we're seeing procurement at email addresses. We want to give you the people that you need to be speaking to. So we've got a separate team of researchers who collate this, and you can search by job role. So if you wanted to look at facilities and estate managers, you can see exactly who you want to be engaging with. It's so important to be speaking to the right people. You can put in a housing association, you can put in a local authority, you can put in even a university, even although that's not fully publicly funded, we provide you with that content. About 80,000 direct points of contact. This is where your sales teams start engaging, the business development conversations start, the marketing teams reach out. It's all GDPR compliant, it's completely tailored for you. We also offer a lot of overviews of marketplaces. We've taken the top 24 market sectors and given you horizon scanning. So if you're at the very earliest stages and you're planning your next 3-year plan, look at construction and property. This gives you a list of all the notices, all the awards, the buyers that are active. You can even filter this by desired contract banding and seeing if you've got a sweet spot of 5 to 10 million, these are all the authorities that are spending within your sweet spot, and who are they working with? You can look at the suppliers. There's so much to track her, but it's all designed to make sure that you're focusing on the right thing at the right time. And the analysis is there, we feed it through to you, and all of the work is done fingertip, click of a button stuff for yourself. And again, happy to showcase that in much more detail to anyone that's interested in seeing more.
Of course, thank you. That's extremely useful insight you showed us there. So thank you very much. And finally, Dawn, let's bring it back home with something practical. So for people, businesses watching today, whether that's, bid managers, business development directors, or SME founders and more, if you had to give those watching today 3 specific actions to take this week based on everything we've covered and what they can take going forwards, what do you think those would be?
Well, I think early engagement, I know I'm saying the same thing repeatedly, but it's such an important part of anyone's strategy. Engage early. Don't wait for a tender to come out. Make sure that you know what the landscape looks like in advance. But also know your market, know who your competitors are, who are they working with, where are the strength of those relationships, who do you want to be targeting, who do you want to be partnering with, because it's not necessarily competitor analysis. A lot of the companies that I work with also use this as a way of knowing which companies they want to partner with. But it's also knowing who to speak to within organisations. Don't always go through procurement teams. They manage the submission stage, but they won't be the people who ultimately decide how those contracts are awarded. So knowing who to speak to is critical. So plan ahead, know your market, and know who to be engaging with, and you're definitely setting yourself up for success.
Absolutely perfect. Dawn, thank you very much for joining us today and for walking us through the data in such a clear and practical way. And there is an enormous amount of actionable intelligence in everything we've covered, and I'm sure businesses watching will be leaving with a very different view of the market to the one they came in with. So it's been a real pleasure, Dawn, and thank you very much for being with us today.
My absolute pleasure. Thanks as well, Christian, and look forward to hearing from anyone that wants to know more.
The construction suppliers who consistently win public sector work are not the ones with the best bid writers, but they are the ones who know what's coming before everyone else does. And the data we've covered today is commercially actionable, but only if you have access to it before your competitors do. So if you'd like to explore how Tracker Intelligence can give you that edge with real-time pipeline monitoring, framework expiry alerts, and award intelligence, then please type Tracker into the chat box now or visit www.trackerintelligence.com to request a free trial or a live demonstration. Before we close, one event worth your attention is approaching. That is ProcureX England 2026, which will be hosted on Thursday, the 18th of June at Exhibition Centre at Liverpool Experience Campus. England's flagship public procurement event brings together more than 2,000 delegates, 100 exhibitors, and more than 50 expert speakers for a full day covering the £400 billion public sector marketplace, including keynote speakers, social value and technology zones, and meet the buyer sessions with active public sector buyers. Tracker Intelligence will also be exhibiting on the day, so please come and find us to see the platform in action or talk through your pipeline. And thanks to everyone who joined me today. A very big thank you once again to Dawn McTaggart for her time, her expertise, and the brilliant analysis that has underpinned today's session. I hope you've all found it very useful as well, and we'll be seeing you again very soon. But for now, it's goodbye.